Hi, Gil from Testing Gil here. The cool thing about testing is the learning. Sometimes we're excited to see that the system just does what it needs to do. Sometimes we get excited when we find a bug. And some of us like debugging, analyzing what we see versus what we expect. But I'll tell you what most of us don't like. The preparations. Obviously, we need to do those in order to do some testing. It can be going through multiple screens just to get where we want to test. Or it could be preparing data files or setting data in the database to be in the state where we want to test. It's tedious, and because it's done by humans, it's error-prone. We can prepare the wrong data, or maybe worse, prepare the right data but use it the wrong way. So, what can we do in order to reduce the risk? Turn to our genie in residence. AI is great at going through the menial steps, which is safer and usually quicker. Let's look at a couple of examples. In our bigger, better bookstore, we have APIs to do everything we want with books. When we call these APIs, it's usually with data. And when we're using tests to test these APIs, we use examples of this data. We usually create those in advance, because we don't like to type everything on the spot. So let's ask Mr. Wright to create some for us. Create a book with all its valid data, and also create invalid data for a book that will not be created. We do need to give the schema to the genie in order for it to create the data in the right way. But once you did, you get a lovely JSON data we can use in our tests. Since our AI companion doesn't care about how much work it needs to do, we can ask it to prepare the data, not just for one API, but for all the APIs that we need to test. And of course, if we already asked it to suggest cases, we can refer to those when it creates the data. If you missed out my video on AI test case generation, check it out. I'm talking about exactly these things. Of course, when we're dealing with APIs, we test some of them in sequence. That means some of the data that's going to be used is going to be dynamic. That means we can't pre-generate everything. But it can still be very useful to have most of the JSON in place, and then we just need to fill out the blanks. For example, in this sequence, we create, update, and delete a book. We can ask the genie to create data for each API call. Now, the first API returns an ID for the new book, which is going to be used in the next API calls. So, this ID is created dynamically, which means that when we're going to use this ID in the body of the next APIs, we're going to fill it out manually. But all the rest of the data is going to appear there, according to the schema. Now, that's not the only data worth creating. There's also assertion data. Our getBook API, which gets all the details, returns all the data of the book that we created it with, both required data and optional data. We can ask the genie to prepare example data so we can compare it to what the actual API call returns. For multiple sets of options for the same book, but with different optional data, we can ask the genie to create multiple examples so we can compare them at the assertion. Now, this may not be the exact data that's going to be returned. When I run the test, I will visually look at the response and the assertion data and compare them and decide what to do about what I'm seeing, if the right data appears in the right place. While I'm at it, why not ask the genie to just create a script that compares the two pieces of data? It will make sure that it will compare the right pieces and ignore the optional part. Take it a step further and instead of a script, generate a test that compares these two, and we can run this one repeatedly. Data preparation is not limited to just preparing request bodies and responses. You can generate data or images or script or some code, but you have to validate and approve what was generated in order to use it in the test. Otherwise, you won't be able to trust these results. In the end, we want to go back to learning. With delegating the data preparations, we can get to the learning much quicker. And we can do more learning in our spare time now. But that's real delegation. It's not just sending the genie to do some errand and not checking what it brought back. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, like, subscribe, share, and watch other videos on this channel. And in the comments, tell me about the data that you generated. the interesting ones that saved you lots of time. Until next time, bye bye.